Okay, we've figured out by now that in the year 2022, running backs don't score fantasy points. We got to nail these wide receiver rankings. That way we don't have Devonta Smith on our bench this week. But before we dive into it, go down there, drop a like on this video if you have not done so already. I want to thank everybody here. Somehow we hit 120,000 subscribers. I'm going to continue to live stream every single night. So if you have not done so already, hit the bell next to the subscribe button. That way you can come out and ask us your questions in the live stream. And also, if you can't make it to the live stream, feel free to ask any question you have in the comment section. I'm going to answer as many of those as I possibly can. But that should be it. Let's go through. Let's dive into these wide receiver rankings and tiers. Leading off with numero uno, Cooper Kupp. I mean, here, what are we supposed to say? I know a lot of people are panicking on Jefferson, someone we'll talk about in a second. Cooper Kupp, from a receiving standpoint this past week, had a massive down week for himself. 4 receptions, 44 receiving yards. But you know Cooper Kupp's not going to do you like that. You know Cooper Kupp's going to get his first rushing touchdown in his entire NFL career because the man has one job out there, and that job is to score as many fantasy points as humanly possible for your fantasy team. Start him tier 1 all by himself every single week. We'll be playing on Monday night, and what's also awesome about Cooper Kupp this week is if you have signed up for Underdog Fantasy, or if you sign up for Underdog Fantasy and use promo code FLOCK, of course, they're going to match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to $100, but you will also get to bet the over on Cooper Kupp, half a receiving yard. Make sure you take advantage of that free money. I mean, thank you, of course, for Underdog Fantasy, giving this to only people who have used promo code FLOCK. So if you sign up for Underdog and you didn't use promo code FLOCK, I'm sorry, that's on you. That's not on me. Let's go down to our next tier. Let's go over and look at Justin Jefferson at 2. Now, I understand here with Justin Jefferson at 2. If we go through, pull up this box score, what we had with the Minnesota Vikings, extremely disappointing. I mean, you had KJ Osborne as the guy down the stretch. I thought Osborne was someone that you could safely cut off your rosters. But here, if we are going to be looking at Jefferson, yes, he's been disappointing the past 2 weeks. But go back to what we had week 1, 187 receiving yards. Go back to what we had his second season, his first season. We know who Justin Jefferson is. I don't care if it's a tough matchup against New Orleans. I don't care if Justin Jefferson's had a down week over the past 2. He's the number 2 wide receiver in fantasy. And if you can trade for him at a discount, please do that ASAP. And now let's go over and look at the backup for Mac Hollins here. Let's go and talk about Devonte Adams against the Denver Broncos this week. Don't love the matchup, but it doesn't really matter. I think here with Devonte Adams, this is going to be a wide receiver that continues to see 10 plus targets a week. He's averaging double-digit targets so far this season. You can't do anything but put Devonte Adams in your starting lineup. Next guy, Stefon Diggs. With Diggs, if you pull up the amount of snaps, the amount of routes run last week, I mean, it was disappointing. You thought Stefon Diggs would have a massive performance considering how many dropbacks Josh Allen had. But in reality, I mean, it was just because he was cramping in the 100-degree Miami heat. Like, come on, are we really complaining about Florida heat, my friend? I think that you go through and have no issue with that this week for Stefon Diggs against the Baltimore Ravens. And you know what? Actually, now that we look at this, with Diggs having that matchup against Baltimore, there's no reason he's behind Devonte Adams. We got to move him to 3 here. Yeah, Stefon Diggs is going to be 3. This has been a horrendous Baltimore Ravens defense. Now, our next guy, Ja'Marr Chase, 5. Ja'Marr Chase going over, playing the Miami Dolphins Thursday night. Should be a very exciting game. I know Ja'Marr Chase himself had a down week this past week, but he had double-digit targets. It's Ja'Marr Chase. Don't worry. If you think that you should be selling Ja'Marr Chase in the low, please fix your life. Now let's drop it down to our next tier here. Let's go over and look at Amon-Ra St. Brown at 6. Yeah, we're going to put St. Brown here. I know this is an extremely aggressive mark, but what I'm looking at is no DeAndre Swift. In my opinion, this is a bump up for Amon-Ra St. Brown, because if you look at St. Brown, he's been fantastic this year, but the majority of these targets come around the line of scrimmage. It's not like Amon-Ra St. Brown is a deep threat in this offense. Now, Jamal Williams will fill in for DeAndre Swift, but Jamal Williams is not the same level of a pass catcher that DeAndre Swift is. So I think you honestly maybe see a small bump up with the targets that you have with Amon-Ra St. Brown. Not too worried about the matchup he has against the Seattle Seahawks. I think you can confidently plug him in wide receiver 6. Now going over wide receiver 7, Deebo Samuel. I mean, we have had a consistent trend now. Week 1, Stefon Diggs pounding the Los Angeles Rams. Week 2, Drake London dominating the Los Angeles Rams. Hollywood Brown, week 3, continuing that same path. I expect nothing else with Deebo Samuel. Now with Deebo, maybe you want to monitor the injury reports. Banged up in the Sunday night game against the Denver Broncos. Looks like he should be fine though, at least based on what I'm looking at. So maybe we use the injury just as a Small tie break, give it to Amon-Ra St. Brown. In reality, it doesn't matter. You play him, not worried about the matchup. Next guy, Mike Evans at 8. With Mike Evans, this can be a shootout game going up against the Kansas City Chiefs. This week, we're going to have to continue to monitor the injury report with Chris Godwin in particular. Godwin's availability is going to affect our perception of this entire offense in general, Tom Brady, and Mike Evans. Of course, we'll be keeping you up to date with Chris Godwin and his status later on in the week. But now our last guy in this year will be Tyree Kill going up against the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, y'all know I was a part of the group that was saying that Jalen Waddle may outscore Tyree Kill this season coming into the year. Mainly that was because I was a massive Jalen Waddle fanboy. But this is something I do want to be keeping track of because yet again, you have Jalen Waddle, massive week here, 4 receptions, over 100 receiving yards in that game against Buffalo where Tyree Kill has a down performance. I'm not going to be reading too much into this, but it's getting close to the point where I think that we can put Jalen Waddle over Tyree Kill. But Tyreek has still been the wide receiver 1 in terms of the targets in the majority of these games. So let's go Tyreek 9. Then we'll go Jalen Waddle 10. They are going to be in 2 separate tiers, but I'm this close to put our guy Jalen Waddle, my most drafted wide receiver this season, ahead of Tyreek. I'm very excited to see this game against the Cincinnati Bengals. I think obviously the storyline's not as much for fantasy. You know, you start T. Higgins, who will be our next guy at 11. You start Jamar Chase. You start Tyree Kill. You start Jalen Waddle. 4 of the top 11 wide receivers this week, in my opinion, are playing on Thursday night. But I think the actual intriguing narrative behind this is obviously you had Tua Tagovailoa supposedly being the number 1 quarterback in that draft. Then Joe Burrow takes the throne. I think this will be an exciting game overall. But next guy in the tier will be Michael Pittman Jr. here. With Michael Pittman Jr., I mean, this is a wide receiver that I'm not the biggest fan of in the world when you had to draft him as the top 10 guy coming into the season. But still, I mean, the Indianapolis Colts look better when Michael Pittman Jr. is in this offense. They look better when you have Alec Pierce in this offense. I don't think that surprises anybody. And against the Tennessee Titans here, Tennessee hasn't done a great job shutting down their opponents this season. And our last guy is going to be A.J. Brown at 13. A.J. Brown still clearly the wide receiver 1 in Philadelphia this season, even if we want to get excited about Devonta Smith, someone we'll be talking about later on. With A.J. Brown, I think this should be one of the more exciting games. You have the Jacksonville Jaguars rolling. You have the Philadelphia Eagles rolling, going up to play each other. Oh, it's going to be exciting. And now our next guy is going to be Hollywood Brown at 14, leading off this year. We've said it time and time again. Hollywood Brown's a must-start guy every single week. We do not have DeAndre Hopkins. Now, yes, you can sit here and go, okay, Kyler's not the quarterback they paid him to be. Kyler Murray's been overhyped. Simply, it doesn't matter because we've been talking about this from a fantasy football standpoint. The Arizona Cardinals are going to continue to push the pace of play. They're going to run so many plays every game. Cliff Kingsbury treats it as if it's Madden. You had 58 pass attempts for Kyler Murray this past week. When you have no DeAndre Hopkins, you're just going to be getting the volume to Hollywood Brown that makes him a must-start guy. Even if we're not a massive fan of the matchup against Carolina, I think this is probably a low-scoring contest overall. What we can say is Chris Olave just had a great game against the Carolina Panthers. And now our next 2 wide receivers, we're going to have Cortland Sudden 15, Jerry Judy 16. So this will be back-to-back weeks for us ranking Cortland Sudden ahead of Jerry Judy. Y'all know I was a Jerry Judy guy coming into the season, but until Jerry Judy's healthy here, Cortland Sutton's the wide receiver 1 in Denver. You have Jerry Judy dealing with the shoulder as well as rib injuries. I mean, I was kind of surprised he played last week. I thought that Jerry Judy was most likely going to be missing. This week should be a little bit healthier, I think, in the long term, probably in the second half of the season when we are not dealing with the lingering effects of these 2 injuries for Jerry Judy. He'll be going back to being the wide receiver 1 in Denver. But for the time being, it's definitely Cortland Sudden. But I think you could be excited about both of these guys, even if Russell Wilson looks very, very bad right now. Now, going over to our next pair of teammates, we're going to have Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. And you know what? Actually, I'm sorry to do this, but we are going to have to move the Los Angeles Chargers guys up before Sutton and Judy, because if I think through this, while Justin Herbert looked bad this past week, Justin Herbert's dealing with his own rib injury. I think that Justin Herbert has a much more valid excuse on why he disappointed this past week than what we've seen from Russell Wilson through the first 3 with Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. Y'all know I was saying Mike Williams, clear buy low candidate after week 1. Don't be surprised if you see him on a sell high wide receiver video this week, because I think that Keenan Allen comes back, and we are going to be ranking Mike Williams ahead of Keenan Allen until he's fully recovered from this hamstring injury. But I'm imagining that we should get Keenan Allen back this week. This will just have to be a situation that we continue to monitor going into the game. Now, I will say, going up against Houston, don't love the matchup because I think the Chargers don't really have a shot for a shootout game here. I think that they are able to just go through and run the ball over and over and over again if that is something they're looking for. But now our next wide receiver, we are going to have Christian Kirk. With Christian Kirk, I mean, this is an option that, oh dear God, is playing in an offense that is significantly, and I repeat, significantly better than I thought they'd be. I mean, I kind of have to sit here and take my L. I thought the Jacksonville Jaguars were going to be a below average team. I thought that, yes, Urban Meyer was garbage, but it's not like Urban Meyer was 100% of the blame of how horrific Trevor Lawrence's rookie season was. I mean, he was really only better than Sam Darnold from an adjusted yards per pass attempt standpoint last year. I knew he was going to get better. I didn't know this offense was going to be this good. I didn't know this team was going to be this good. Christian Kirk's clearly the wide receiver one. Even if Zay Jones had more targets last week, I think we can be excited about Christian Kirk. And we're going to drop it down a tier to our guy here with Gabriel Davis going up against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, with Gabriel Davis going up against Baltimore, it is difficult for me to nail down the exact expectations that we should have, because if you go and look at the amount of routes run that you had from Gabriel Davis last week, Gabriel Davis out there for a million Josh Allen dropbacks. Like, he benefited from the game script. He benefited from Stefon Diggs missing a large chunk of the contest. I mean, you would have thought that that was a smash spot for Gabriel Davis. I told everybody that Davis was a must-start wide receiver. However, despite all the stars aligning, this was a player that did disappoint. Back week one as well, he only had 5 targets. I don't know. It's hard for me to rank Gabriel Davis any lower than this, just because we are looking at the fact that this is a wide receiver that is playing alongside Josh Allen and going up against the possibly worst secondary in the NFL right now with the Baltimore Ravens. So even if you are worried about Gabriel Davis, this is someone you just have to jam in your starting lineup. Now, drop it down into tier, someone that's been on our buy low video week after week after week, Deontay Johnson. With Deontay Johnson, this is a wide receiver that I want to sit here and say, okay, well, he had 10 targets a game in 2020. 10 targets a game in 2021. He was the wide receiver 7 on a points per game basis in 2021. And so far this season, Deontay Johnson, 10 targets week 1, 10 targets week 2, 10 targets week 3 minimum. He's a target hog. We can safely say that about Deontay Johnson at this point. I think that he's a must-start guy for you every week. Obviously, this offense is very bad. I think the hope is long-term we get Kenny Pickett in here, and hopefully Kenny Pickett can kind of save the day. But I don't know. It's going to work out. If we keep on playing Deontay Johnson, we keep on just locking these targets into our starting lineup, there's no way this doesn't work out over the long term. And now our next wide receiver in this year is going to be Devonta Smith at 22. With Smith as well, I know it seems like we're only talking about positives with every single guy here. I mean, we could sit here and talk about Devonta Smith having over 150 receiving yards a week ago. A wide receiver that was one of the best, if not the best, collegiate wide receivers of all time back in 2020. There's so much to be excited about. It's just hard. Like, if you want to make an argument that Devonta Smith should be ranked a lot higher than this, I can't argue against it. It sounds crazy that we have Devonta Smith at 22. But if we look at the names that are in front of him, I don't know who we want to put him behind. Maybe you put him behind the Denver guys if you're really worried about Russ. Maybe you could make that argument, but I don't know. Please let me know what you think about Devonta Smith down there in the comment section, because saying it out loud that Devonta Smith is our wide receiver 22 this week sounds crazy, but maybe this just goes to the fact that there are so many productive wide receivers. There's so many guys to get excited about. Now let's drop it down to our next tier. Let's go over and look at CeeDee Lamb 23. With Lamb, can't really talk about him. I'm recording this right before the Monday night game. That way we can get you this on Tuesday. So really don't want to talk too much here about CeeDee Lamb. But what I'll say is, if Michael Gallup's coming back, if Dalton Schultz is coming back, and we still have Cooper Rush, probably a little bit worried about CeeDee Lamb, but very similar to Brandon Cooks. He's going to be a top target hog in a very bad NFL offense. So I think you do have to rank him here. And then our next guy is going to be Amari Cooper, 24. Amari, good matchup against the Atlanta Falcons. He crushed week 2. He crushed week 3. To be honest with you, I am still somewhat concerned if Jacoby Brissett's going to be your starting quarterback. I don't think we can put him ahead of guys like Devonta Smith and Deontay Johnson. Now, 25, Michael Thomas, a wide receiver that we are going to have to continue to monitor this injury with. I think that Michael Thomas, if he's cleared, if he's good to go, and we can assume that he plays the normal amount of snaps this weekend, this will be a player that when we give you our update later on in the week is a lot higher in these rankings. But I don't know if I just see the name Michael Thomas, injury, it kind of scares me. Our next guy, Drake London, going up against the Cleveland Browns. Honestly, don't love this matchup. I think the Browns have a very good defense. I think they're probably going to be able to limit the Atlanta Falcons offense better than what some other units have done so far this year. But Drake London, a freaking stud. I think we can be so excited about him in the long term. And then our last wide receiver in this year is going to be Chris Olave. This is going to be dependent on the Michael Thomas injury. If Michael Thomas looks like he's going to be 100% good to go, I think you could drop Olave down to the next tier. However, if Michael Thomas is out, I think you could make the argument that maybe Chris Olave belongs up there in the same tier as Deontay Johnson and Devonta Smith. So I'll make sure we're giving you this update later on in the week. But as of now, I mean, Chris Olave coming up back-to-back performances with double-digit targets. A week ago, led the NFL in air yards. Very exciting deep threat option for Jameis Winston. And now our last wide receiver tier, going to be led off with a couple of the Carson Wentz receivers. We're going to go Terry McLaurin, 28, and we are going to be going with Curtis Samuel, 29. Curtis Samuel continues to get the volume. Terry McLaurin looked like he wasn't going to get there this past week, but he kind of got lucky. I think it's safe to say that based on the garbage time production here when the game was completely out of hand between the Philadelphia Eagles and the Washington Commanders. I'm going to repeat what I said last week in that I don't think you can expect that you are going to consistently see 300 passing yards a game from Carson Wentz in this offense. There's a lot of target competition with McLaurin, with Curtis Samuel, with John Dotson, with Logan Thomas, with Antonio Gibson, with J.D. McKissick. So I don't know. I mean, we said to sell high on these guys last week. Probably still selling high if we can. Now, our next wide receiver in this year is going to be Brandon Cooks, 30. I know so many people got mad at me for ranking Brandon Cooks too low last week. I'm going to stand by what we said last week. I think that Brandon Cooks is a very good wide receiver in a very bad offense. I hate that everybody and their mom says, oh, Davis Mills, most underrated quarterback in the NFL. I don't get why y'all are saying this. I don't get what y'all are seeing here with Davis Mills. I think Brandon Cooks, high floor, low upside guy. And then our next player, we can throw a couple other names on this list. I know this is a top 30 list. I'll get you that top 36 later on the week once we get more injury reports. DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, right off the list here. Very similar to Brandon Cooks. Extremely talented wide receivers, but when you're playing in piss poor offenses, it's going to be hard for you to consistently overcome that. It's going to be hard for us to find a good spot to rank you. So let me know what you think about these guys right outside, guys like DJ Moore or DK Metcalf. If there's anybody else that you think that we missed off this list, go to the comment section. Let me know what we missed. And also, please take advantage of this. Go use promo code FLOCK on Underdog Fantasy. They'll match your first deposit dollar for dollar up to 100, so it's free for you to try out. And then go bet the over on half a receiving yard on Cooper Kupp before Monday night. Now, this player prop's not going to show up on Underdog Fantasy for those people who use promo code FLOCK until Friday. I will make the announcement when you should be able to see it in the app there where you can go take advantage of it. But make sure you go sign up for Underdog today. That way you don't miss out. But thank you again. I appreciate you. I hope you have a great day, and hope we get to see you with the live stream tonight.